York Times published an explosive piece indicating that the FBI did open a counterintelligence investigation into the President of the United States following his decision to fire James Comey. Now, there were other reasons for this counterintelligence investigation, and it also had to do with what Trump had to say in an interview with Lester Holt.
Did you ask for a recommendation?
What I did is I was going to fire Comey. My decision. It was not.
You had made the decision before they came in the room.
I was going to fire Comey. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election.
Okay, so the fact that he fired Comey and the statements that Trump had made during that interview convinced FBI officials to open this counterintelligence investigation into Donald Trump, and we didn't learn about that until recently.
So I just want to give 2 pieces of context before Anna gives you more of the information. The FBI does 2 types of investigations: criminal investigations and counterintelligence operations, to make sure that someone in our government, almost never the president, but now we're in a unique situation, is not working with a foreign government for a number of reasons. In this case, they combine both of those investigations because of possible obstruction of justice and because they were now officially worried that Donald Trump might be an agent of a different government, in this case, Russia. And there was actually 5 different reasons why. The Comey firing was just the straw that broke the camel's back as to starting an official investigation. They were concerned all the way dating back to the campaign for reasons that we'll explain here.
Yeah. I mean, the 2 reasons that I outlined were the factors that finally pushed them over the edge, because there was a huge debate among FBI officials as to whether or not it made sense to open a counterintelligence investigation into the President of the United States. That's unprecedented. And so finally they're like, okay, I mean, there are too many factors here that make us suspicious about Trump's ties to Russia. So according to the Times, counterintelligence investigators had to consider whether the president's own actions constituted a possible threat to national security. Agents also sought to determine whether Mr. Trump was knowingly working for Russia or had unwittingly fallen under Moscow's influence. So they didn't know whether Trump was knowingly involved with Putin, working in Russia's favor against the best interests of the United States, or if he was just unwittingly doing Putin's bidding because he had been influenced.
Both are incredibly possible, because I think that after dealing with the president for some time, they realized the man is one of the least intelligent people we've ever met. So could he accidentally be a dupe for Putin? Yeah, he could be a dupe for anyone because he's a dupe. But in this case, I tend to think that it's much more active and for reasons that we'll get into.
Now, Trump was also quoted as saying what I'm about to tell you after he had fired Comey. And this is relevant because he was actually speaking to Russian officials in the Oval Office following Comey's firing. And he said, quote, "I just fired the head of the FBI. He was crazy, a real nut job. I faced great pressure because of Russia. That's taken off."
Okay, see, that's even more devastating than the video you just saw of him on NBC. So they're inside the Oval Office talking to Russian officials, and he assures the Russians, don't worry, the pressure's off on the Russia situation. What are you doing? Are you nuts? I mean, it goes both to being complicit with the Russians and being deeply unintelligent. If he was like some sort of secret agent man that had any kind of savvy at all, you wouldn't say that in the Oval Office, you schmuck. But he's too stupid, so he's like, don't worry guys, Russia's my best friends. Don't worry, I took the pressure off. I fired the guy who was investigating us, me and you. I fired him, don't worry. How is that not collusion? I mean, look guys, I think whether you're right wing and there's some left wingers that are still holding on to this idea that, oh golly gee, this is all innocent. Man, take your blinders off, man. If any president tells any foreign government, let alone an adversary in the Oval Office, oh don't worry, I fired the head of the FBI because he was looking into your government and me. You did what? What? That's crazy. So should you investigate that? You should be fired if you don't investigate that. Look, now let me explain the other factors, but this is plenty enough. So during the campaign, first of all, they see, well, the guy won't say anything negative about Putin or Russia and keeps giving him incredible praise. That alone would not be anywhere near sufficient. You could argue for allies like Israel, every candidate does that. Flowery praise of whether their government is left wing or right wing, etc. So it's a small data point. Then they move on to, well, they weirdly, now this is a real thing, they weirdly changed the platform, the Republican Party platform, to be more pro-Russian. Well, that's gratuitous, and we all saw that in public. We commented about it on the Young Turks as it was happening. We're like, wow, that is brazen. You're being accused of, even at the time we knew that they had connections, some connections to Russia, and Trump weirdly on the campaign is like, Putin is great, he's wonderful, he's so strong, right? And then all of a sudden they changed the platform to make it pro-Russian. That's a huge red flag, in this case, almost literally, okay? And then, so then there's the Steele memo. And you can say Steele memo is uncorroborated, and that's true. Some parts of it have now been proven to be correct. But at the time, it's a small data point. I wouldn't take that, and I didn't at the time take it too seriously. Now I take it a lot more seriously because a bunch of stuff in there that seemed crazy or outlandish were proven correct. So, okay, but that's just another data point. But to me, the absolute one that put it over the top is he has 4 different people working on his campaign deeply connected to the Russians. That is massively weird. Look, I did a video over the weekend and used this example, but you could fill in the blanks on any of them. If Obama had 4 different people working on his campaign that were all connected to the Iranian government and the Grand Ayatollah, would that be a red flag? Of course. They'd be like, why does Obama have 4 staffers who are getting paid or are connected to the Grand Ayatollah, who is an adversary of ours? In this case, take out Mullah, put in oligarch, take out their leaders and put in the Khomeini, I guess, and put in Putin, right? And that's the same exact situation. So the FBI is like, wait, and they still didn't investigate. They still didn't open a counterintelligence investigation into Trump. Then he becomes president. Then he's like, oh, Comey's looking into the Russians, I fire him. Then he goes on TV and says, I fired him because he was looking into the Russians. Then he brings the Russians in and says, don't worry, I fired him. If you don't start an investigation as to whether he's working with the Russians at that point, you are not doing your job.
Right.
People are saying that this is debatable. It's unprecedented, that's definitely true. But we've never had another situation where the president of the United States might be so deeply immoral and corrupt that he's working for a foreign government, but it is not debatable. You'd be crazy not to open an investigation with this fact pattern on any president.
And it's not just about Trump's complimentary, tone when it comes to dealing with Putin. It's not just about the fact that he had all of these campaign officials deeply tied with Russia. There was that huge story that broke last week involving Paul Manafort and how he had handed over campaign data, polling data to Russian officials. But it's also the fact that Trump's policies toward Russia are very different from previous policies. So for instance, the White House following Trump's election was much more favorable to Russia and its annexation of Crimea, whereas the Obama administration imposed some pretty strong sanctions against Russia for doing that. And so it's about Trump's actions, not just his words. His words give you a clue into what motivated his policy decisions toward Russia.
So look, let's look at the Crimea example, because he's done a number of things that are considered pro-Russian, but some are debatable. So he wants to withdraw from Syria, but to be fair to him, he said that during the campaign that he wanted to withdraw overall from the Middle East. And I think there's an argument to be made that we agree with on withdrawal. That doesn't mean he's doing it for the right reasons. He might be doing it because he's in bed with the Russians, but I'm giving you that as, hey, no, that one's debatable, right? And there are others that you can say are debatable. Maybe he's obsessed with destroying NATO because they're not, in his mind, paying their bills. It could be. I think that's less debatable, but all right. But randomly turning around and saying, oh yeah, Crimea, that belongs to Russia.
Yeah.
Well, there's no logical explanation for that. Now, if you said, hey, he's not willing to go to war over Crimea, okay, totally fine, different conversation. He's not willing to ruin our relationship with Russia and working on other projects, okay, we're having a conversation. But gratuitously saying, well, they probably should have annexed it, That's against all US foreign policy. It's irrational, it makes no sense. He wouldn't put the sanctions into place until he was absolutely forced to. Come on, guys, you gotta be blind, deaf, and dumb here not to realize there's something special going on here. But the last one, and it's a different story, and we'll cover it as well, and don't miss that one. But now the Washington Post is reporting that whenever he goes to talk to Putin, he takes away the notes of the interpreters and won't have anyone else in the room. Oh yeah, the presidents never do that. Gee, I wonder if there's a special relationship that Trump has with Putin that he doesn't want anybody else to find out about. When he says to the interpreter, you better not share anything you have, here, give me your goddamn notes. Gee, I wonder if he says something to Putin that he doesn't want anybody else to find out. Now, if you're saying you still don't believe there's a connection between Trump and the Russians, you're just choosing to be completely biased for whatever reason, because that's what you believed in the past, and I'm gonna hold on to it for dear life. The guy clearly is connected to Putin. I don't know what the exact contours of the deal are. I'm not sure anyone does, but there's a goddamn deal. It's clear as day. If you're trying to avoid it, it's your problem, and you will not face the obvious facts.
Right, and in addition to Trump saying that Russia is essentially, or was essentially, entitled to annexing Crimea. He's also repeatedly attacked NATO and NATO allies, and NATO is a form of defense against Russia, essentially. And so all of these things, when you put them together, kind of draws a narrative that he is deeply tied to Russia. We don't know exactly why or how, but that's how this all appears. And by the way, we don't know what the findings of this counterintelligence investigation were or are. We have no idea. That was not outlined in the Times piece. So what you're gonna hear over and over again from Trump and his allies is that, they didn't find anything. No, that's not true. The Times didn't report anything about the outcome of the investigation. I mean, this is something that we'll find out in the future. Now, with that said, Trump did appear on Jeanine Pirro's Fox News show, and he was asked about this counterintelligence investigation. Here's what he had to say.
Are you now, or have you ever worked for Russia, Mr. President?
I think it's the most insulting thing I've ever been asked. I think it's the most insulting article I've ever had written. And if you read the article, you'd see that they found absolutely nothing. But the headline of that article, it's called The Failing New York Times for a reason. They've gotten me wrong for 3 years. They've actually gotten me wrong for many years before that. But you look at what's going on. I fired James Comey. I call him Lion James Comey because he was a terrible liar, and he did a terrible job as the FBI director. Look at what happened with Hillary Clinton and the emails and the Hillary Clinton investigation, one of the biggest screw-ups that anybody's ever seen as an investigation. And what happened after I fired him, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, his lover, Lisa Page, they did it, and they're all gone.
So he doesn't answer the question. Like, he says that he's offended, it's such an offensive thing to ask him, but he doesn't really answer the question. He immediately deflects by mentioning FBI officials and the former FBI counsel who were not fans of Trump, but who also were not fans of Hillary Clinton. He keeps latching on to the fact that they had exchanged text messages that were critical of Trump, but the fact that they were critical of Trump never was involved in the actual investigation of Trump or collusion or potential ties to Russia.
So it might be that his lawyers have pounded into his head the last couple of months, the last couple of years. Hey, if you actually did something, do not strongly deny it on the record because it'll come back to bite you. So in this case, he didn't deny it. He just said, I find it offensive that you would ask. Okay, so now, I mean, look, we have a child for a president. I call him Lying James Comey.
It's very clever.
Yeah. What is that? What is that? I mean, if you're on a campaign trail and you think it's a populist thing to do, et cetera, okay, that's one thing. You're already president of the United States. I call the former FBI director Lying James Comey, because that's really clever. No, it's not. No, it's not. That means you're a goddamn moron. Like, I call him Lying James Comey like a third grader. And they call it the failing New York Times. No, nobody calls it that except you. I have a bone to pick with New York Times on different biases that they have that are actually pro-conservative. Yes, your head can go ahead and explode if you're a conservative. Oh, no way, man, they like gay people, they're so liberal. I got it. I'm not gonna get into that. But look at this child Are you a Russian agent, Mr. President? I call him lying James Comey, the failing New York Times. Answer a serious question on an incredibly serious topic.
I want to go to the next video because he makes a claim here that I think is important to address and debunk. Take a look.
If you ask the folks in Russia, I've been tougher on Russia than anybody else, probably any other president, period. But certainly the last 3 or 4 presidents, modern day presidents, nobody's been as tough as I have from any standpoint, including the fact that we're doing oil like we've never done it. We're setting records in our country with oil and exporting oil and many other things. So, which is obviously not great for them because that's where they get their money for the most part.
So Trump argues that he is tougher on Russia than any other president, except, and this is according to the Washington Post, Trump has dismissed Russia's election interference as a hoax, suggested that Russia was entitled to annex Crimea in Ukraine, repeatedly attacked NATO allies, resisted efforts to impose sanctions on Moscow, and begun to pull US forces out of Syria. So look, again, as Drake had mentioned earlier in the story, Trump has been wanting to pull troops out of Syria, so we'll give him that. But all the other decisions by Trump suggest that he is not tough on Russia. He's the exact opposite.
Yeah, he says these outlandish things. The Senate passed that resolution 98-2 to put sanctions on Russia. And Trump said, I don't want to sign it. All right, I have to sign it. And then he refused to enforce it for a long time until he just was not remotely legally permissible anymore to not enforce it. And finally, begrudgingly, and again, he's so unintelligent that he says it in public. I don't want to do this. I think these sanctions are a bad idea on Russia. Poor Russia. I don't know why we're doing this to Russia, but okay, fine, I guess I'm gonna have to do it. Hey, if you want to make it seem like you're not in bed with Russia, you might pretend that you were in favor of the sanctions, but he's too stupid to do that. So, I've been the toughest ever on Russia. Based on what, you child? So, look, I don't know that, like I said now, we're clear on the facts. I don't know the exact details of what deal he might have with the Russians. But I'll be honest with you, I get frustrated with the left wing. Right wing, I get it, they're MAGA. You put on that red hat, that means you stop thinking. And you don't care about facts or logic or reason, right? But some of the left wing, well, that means that we can't concentrate on Medicare for all. Really? That's so hard? Like, okay, Trump might have been working with the Russians and we must pass Medicare for all right now. Wow, I just did it. Oh my God, I must be a genius. No, you could do both things at once. I also don't agree with the establishment who's like, hey, listen, we got to focus all of our energy on Trump and Russia, so we can't do Medicare for all. No, that makes no logical sense. You can do both. It's not an either or proposition. So anyone who can't see it, this connection is trying super hard not to see it. And yes, that means you're totally biased. The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.